Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Draft on Tap. My name is Aldo Gandia, and we've got another really good one for you tonight. We've got a very special guest that we'll introduce in a moment. But first, let me introduce the stars of the show, beginning with Danny Shimon. Danny, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Just trying to survive this crappy weather we have here, in the Midwest. But just grinding away, man, grinding away. This is my time. This is my time of year. The draft. We've been through the college all-star games, and now we're heading to the combine coming up. That's the next phase in terms of this pre-draft evaluation stuff. So this is my time of year, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, and don't be whining about the weather. You've lived in Chicago your entire life. You've experienced snow in June. So
I'm done.
I see Niel also agreeing with me. Why is he whining about the weather?
Aldo Gandia, Danny Shimon, always a pleasure to be on with you, distinguished gentlemen. Hey, happy National Margarita and Ash Wednesday.
Nice.
To you both.
Those
how about that for a combination, right? Nice and Catholic for you.
Oh, that is hilarious.
Guys, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. The weather has been kicking my ass too. Last week when it was like 55 degrees last Saturday. It was like 50 degrees for the Super Bowl. Then it got back down to freezing. And the previous week it was like -5. Like whenever the weather goes like this and goes crazy, my sinuses, my system just goes nuts. And the entire last week I was like a freaking zombie. Was not fun. Finally came back to life Saturday night, Sunday. And so here we are. Definitely a different week than it was last week at this time.
You young guys complaining about the weather. I don't believe it, man. I'm going to bring in a guy who never complains about the weather. His name is Nick Baumgardner. He is a senior writer over at TheAthletic. And boy, oh boy, I have fallen in love with his articles and his Twitter account. Nick, how are you, my friend?
Doing very good. I'm not going to complain about the weather, guys, even though it is horrible weather here too in Detroit. So we are, but hey, that's what we do in the Midwest, right? We're okay.
There you go.
Exactly.
Nick, before we get started with the Q&A, tell our followers a little bit about yourself and how long have you been at The Athletic, and just fill us in.
Yeah, so I've been at The Athletic as a senior writer since 2019 in a bit of a different role. The last couple of years I've been mostly focused on the draft. I would say the last year full, but probably the last 2 years. Really, I've also done some Detroit Lions, covered Michigan football for a long time. Worked for the Detroit Free Press, Ann Arbor News. Had a journalism background, so a little bit of everything. And I do a little bit of everything at The Athletic. I work a lot with Dane Brugler. I work a lot with our college football staff. I still do some features here and there, so a little bit of all over the place. But I love watching tape, so that's what I try to do as much as I can.
Yeah, and you do a great job of putting tape up on Twitter and analyzing the tape for us. So really appreciate that. By the way, you mentioned Michigan. Did you see that interview with Justin Fields on Rich Eisen? And he talked about how at Ohio State they would pee on Michigan jerseys in preparation for their big game with them.
It's not surprising. I remember, I covered the couple years that he was there, that he came through, and I guess it was only the 1 year, right? He only played him the one, because the second year he would have had the COVID.
Right.
But my lasting image of him was they pounded Michigan in Michigan Stadium, and he said something like, Ohio State takes football more serious than Michigan. And I was like, whoa, okay. Whoa. And it was like, fair enough. And it was like, then he'd walk out the door and nobody could say anything. So yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, there you go. All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to turn it over to Danny Shimon, and he's going to begin the interview with you, Nick, and then Niel will get his jabs in, and then we'll rotate back, and then we'll let you get out of here, okay?
Perfect. Sounds good.
All right, Danny, why don't you take it away, my friend?
All right. Well, Aldo gave me only 10 minutes to talk to you, Nick, but it's going to be more than 10 minutes here when I start talking about
no problem.
Just be prepared. But anyway, all joking aside, obviously I talked about earlier at the beginning of the show how now we're in a grind of getting into these prospects and grinding this tape and kind of formulating all of our boards. Obviously the college, the Senior Bowl and the East-West Shrine game is in the rearview mirror now. Some players shined out, some players stood out, some players made names for themselves. The next step here is the combine. Are there any players that you're looking for in terms of the combine that maybe either carry over what they started at either in Mobile or in Vegas with the All-Star games, and then now kind of at the next level keep going, or are there guys that maybe didn't quite shine and you're like, what, this next format, the combine is going to be where they kind of just you'll hear their name and all of a sudden their stock's going to be flying out the roof.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I wish we lived in a world that was more similar to the NBA, where we could see these guys, the younger guys that aren't at the Senior Bowl or aren't at the whatever, the Shrine Game or whatever it is. And that's unfortunate, but that's the only, so like a guy like Lucas Van Ness, the edge from Iowa, is one that most people expect to have some pretty freaky workouts. And he's a guy that wasn't at the Senior Bowl, right? He wasn't in Mobile. He was too young. And he's one of these guys who's like, we just did our consensus big board earlier in the week where we take big boards from like 12 or 15 different places, put them all together. And he's still way, way, way too low. But he's a guy that I keep telling people after he works out, he's going to be way higher. He's going to be mid to high first round by the time it's all said and done. Another guy that you mentioned that was in Mobile that we did see for one day, DeJuan Jones, Ohio State, played with Fields. Was there for one day, played really well, and then had tweaked something, whatever it was. A lot of us there kind of wondered maybe he showed all he needed to show and then went home, which would also have been fine. But he's another one that I'm curious to see how, number one, if he does everything, if he runs and does everything at the combine, and if that can maybe even help him a little bit more. I think he helped himself in Mobile, but I'm not sure he helped himself as much as people maybe thought he did, or as much as maybe he could have. So he's one that I'm definitely interested in for sure.
Yeah, with Lucas Van Ness, that's a good name, because that's a guy that I'm intrigued by. Obviously, here with the Bears, defensive line, defensive front is a huge need. And with Iowa, when I watch his tape, I've seen him, stand up in a 2-point stance, rush from an outside. I've seen him as an interior defensive lineman. So I think his versatility is what teams are going to love about him. Now, obviously, I think his frame has got room to grow, so I think they're going to add some more muscle to him. But I talked about him, previewing him for the Bears here in terms of he's a guy you can bring in as probably like a base defensive end, and also on those third down situations, kick him inside and bring, if you want, your NASCAR package in and have 4 defensive linemen rush the quarterback. So do you see him eventually landing at either defensive tackle, or do you still see him as an end coming out?
So I think Lucas, he's a little bit like one of these versatile, like the hyper versatile Aiden Hutchinson type player. That's what I sort of see. And Will Anderson is a more explosive version of that, where I think he can play pretty much anywhere and win. And I think Van Ness, I'm not sure that I would label it, because I think, like you said, Danny, he stood up too at Iowa. He dropped and covered, and I'm curious with him to see, depending on where he goes, like Green Bay took Rashawn Gary out of Michigan, not to totally go back to Michigan, but it's another similar prospect. They took him, and he was a defensive end, hand on the ground the whole time. They stood him up some. They changed his rush package, and he's had a terrific career because of it. I wonder if we'll see some more of that with him, but I also wouldn't want, like you're saying, I wouldn't want to lose what he can do inside on third down. You know what I mean? Like, he's really good with the length and the power, because his punch, I think they call him Hercules. That's his nickname. And he used to play hockey too. That's at that size. So yeah, I don't know if the Bears are going to have a shot at him though. They're going to have to trade down or something, because he's going to be, I think he's going to be pretty high.
Right. Yeah. Just talking about maybe, late first round, second round, depending on how he does, where he goes. But, so a name you brought up is Will Anderson. Obviously, I believe last time you're on your overall draft board, he was your top rated player. He's a top rated player on a lot of boards, but something with Will Anderson. And again, and when this format that we're doing here, I'm scouting for the Bears and for their scheme. And for me, with Will Anderson, like he's not my top edge rusher. For me, it's Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. And mainly because I think just in scheme fit. And when I look at Anderson, I just look at a guy, and I've been told by area scouts that he played at 250 plus at Alabama this past season.
Right.
Well, I put on his tape, man. He looks like he's 238, 240, dripping wet. So that's what I'm curious to see in terms of how he comes in terms of weight. And then you mentioned in terms of he can play all along the defensive line. For me, he's more of a 3-4 outside linebacker. So if a team like the Bears is going to draft him, I think as a defensive staff, you got to come to Ryan Poles and say, this is how I'm going to use him. You need a plan for this kid. So so just curious in terms of Will Anderson, do you project him? I know he's number 1 overall on your board, but do you see him as a 3-4 outside linebacker, hand in the ground defensive end? How do you guys see him?
Yeah, I'm with you at the start. I think that's where that begins, right? I think that he begins so whatever he's most comfortable with, and then you work from there. And I think the thing that I've sort of landed on the most when I watch him, I think he has the highest ceiling of anybody, but I don't necessarily know that I would even take him one. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I might, if I was Chicago, take Jalen Carter, because I think that for all the reasons you're saying, I agree with everything you said. But I also think with Anderson, it's like there's still some projection there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure that we've seen everything that he can do yet. Because, I mean, again, I think that there's some coverage pieces there too that, you know, we totally haven't seen him do that. Maybe he didn't do at Bama. It depends on the scheme. It depends on where he falls in. But it's like, that's the hard part, right? Because if you're going to a defense that's not any good around him and still needs, you know, it'd be better if he were able to go somewhere that has talent and he can sort of tinker, but he's not going to be able to do that. So he's one of those tricky ones where it's like, and I totally can see, I think I have Wilson top 5 on the last list I was going through right here. So at least on a mock. So, I mean, if you're looking for a certain thing, he's probably giving it to you faster, Wilson, that would be, than Anderson. But long term, I mean, I think Will Anderson might be the best defensive prospect on the board. So that's kind of the conversation that I always end up having with him.
And speaking of freaky athletes, and just kind of flip it over to the other side and the offensive side, and obviously a quarterback is the rage here, and everyone's talking about, you know, is it going to be Young? Is it going to be Stroud? And then I've said all along, and Aldo can chime in, and Niel can chime in as well. I've said the kid that's going to go top 10 in this draft is Anthony Richardson. And I think reading some of your work, and I know you have a liking of you know, you like this kid as well. I just think that the body type, the you know, the size, the athletic ability, the cannon for an arm, the quick release. He's not ready to play next year. He's not ready to play maybe within 2 years. Who knows? But if you're a team like, say, the Lions, or if you're a team like Seattle, you know, and you have a veteran quarterback that you can kind of draft this kid, because, you know, if you're those teams, you're not planning on being this high up in the draft, you know, next coming 2-3 years. So do you take him? And then now you have Jared Goff if you're Detroit, you know, starting for next year, maybe 2 years. You're Seattle. You have Geno Smith starting for next year or 2 years, and take a kid that could potentially be the best quarterback in this draft class.
Yeah, those two teams right there are the two that I've thought about the most. Washington would be another one. You know, it depends on what they would want to do. But then, you know, we also see, you know, we'll see where some of these other bridge guys land in free agency. But those two that you mentioned off the top, especially Detroit, you know, I live here, but like that's one that I've thought about for them for like a year and a half, because, you know, the more comfortable Jared Goff got, you know, and the fact that, like you say, I mean, you don't need him for a year. I think he's probably closer to being ready than most people probably give him credit for, but you wouldn't even really have to force him in through 2. It gets complicated with the contracts and everything else, and it's not exactly the best case scenario. But the reward there is Josh Allen. Like, that's the reward. That's who I think, you know, top end he tops out as. And, you know, that's the scenario, I guess, that you're going to have to wait for yourself, and how much can you develop him. I think Detroit and Seattle would be two teams, especially Detroit, with its offensive line right now, that is going to give a young quarterback who needs time to grow. They would give a player like that time. I mean, you would be built to give him time. I think a player like Richardson could go to both of those teams, or somebody else like that. And even as he learns, you could use him as a runner. You could use him and get him involved and have packages for him throughout the year. You know, I think Dane Brugler, I think he had him 13 or 14 in his last top 100. I told him I was glad, because I don't think he's going to make it past the middle of the first round. I mean, I think that the conversation after the combine might be, like we're saying, like it might be top 10 for him. It might, you know, that might be what we're talking about in a week or two. But, you know, we'll see. He's really inconsistent. He's got a long way to go. You have to have a good. That's one where if you're a mess, you don't do it. Like if you're Houston and you're still trying to. Don't do it. Like, but if you got a foundation, if you got a foundation under you and you think you're okay and you've got some good coaches, he'd be perfect. You really interesting player.
You need coaching staff that's going to bring this kid. And like you said, the tools are off the chart, but he, you know, his accuracy down the field is inconsistent at best. His decision making is his mechanics are. You watch him;
they're all over the place.
Yeah, so he's the guy that you need to have a plan for. But that's why I always saw. This is before I even saw the final list in terms of the draft order. I said, this kid, just because someone's going to fall in love with him in terms of his skill set and say, you know what, give me this kid, give me a year, I'll coach him up, and he'll be out there and he'll be making plays like crazy. So I still think he's going to go top 10. But Detroit is a team that, and like I said, Seattle, two teams that I'd keep my eye on. So it will be interesting where that kid goes at the end. So keeping on the quarterback theme here, obviously that's the big talk about the offseason. So my last thing for you is not a question. It's more of like a team association, right? So I'll give you a name. I'm going to give you 3 veterans, and I'll give you three young, draft prospects. And the first team that comes to mind that you think this player potentially could land at, right? So
okay.
the first quarterback is Derek Carr.
Derek Carr. I think Washington is the one. Maybe because I just talked about Washington, but they need somebody, and I'm not convinced. I think they think they're closer to being ready, and he would be maybe. I kind of look at him like Jared Goff, right? Where it's like maybe he can revive himself somewhere. So I like that.
All right, Aaron Rodgers.
Well, I feel like it's Jets or Packers. I think Jets. I'm going to go with the dicey thing or the spicy selection and say Jets. I think I think the Jets are going to go get somebody, and they're not going to swing light. I would think if they go get somebody.
All right, maybe they get this next guy, Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, maybe they get him. He feels like Tampa Bay. I think that's another one where I look at them and say, they're in a situation where Richardson's been another one I've looked at that for them. But again, I think they have a roster, depending what they want to do with the rest of the free agency pieces. That'd be a good fit there too.
All right. In terms of the guys in the draft, Bryce Young.
Houston. I don't think he gets past 2. I think he's the QB1.
Okay. CJ Stroud.
Indy. Unless Vegas trades up. Like that's my one. I think I take Indy at 4 with CJ right now is where I'm looking at it.
And I think we covered Richardson already. I think you said Tampa Bay for Richardson, right? So
I've said Tampa. He's a hard one. Washington would be another one that I've looked at for him. Detroit. Seattle.
I'm pretty much in line with you in terms of all these guys. The one thing with Carr, one team no one talks about, Tennessee Titans. They clear about $28 million of cap today with cutting Lawan and Robert Everett Woods, and so keep an eye on Tennessee. They might be able to sneak in there, get Derek Carr, and go ahead and trade Tannehill or cut him or whatnot. So, Neil, the floor is yours. You're on mute, Neil.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, I always have to go on mute because this cat wants to come in here and have a bunch of opinions.
I know how that goes.
On a weekly basis, man, I swear to God. What's that?
I used to have a boxer, R.I.P., but he was a loud one.
Well, the dog's asleep right now, so it's mainly the cat that's about to come in here and try to interject himself into the conversation.
Cats do love the draft. That is true.
he is associate barroom scout, so I mean, I guess he does deserve to have his voice heard.
Love it.
But welcome to the show, bud. Normally a bucket list item for our guests to come on this distinguished program. Happy to have you. How are you, pal?
Yeah, absolutely, very good. Happy to be here. Hope you're not also in. Although the weather is not good where you're at as well. So we're all.
It's just raining, man. It's just disgusting outside. It's been just pouring down all day. We didn't get any of that ice stuff. I think the boys, on the other side of this program are experiencing up north of us. But it is what it is. Rolling with the punches.
There we go.
Did you have a chance to get down to Senior Bowl?
I did, yes. I was at the Senior Bowl. I did not go to the Shrine game, but I was at the Senior Bowl for the whole shebang. Did not stay for the game, but it was good. Got sunburnt beyond repair on the first day. It was the hottest. I think it was like the hottest day in like 15 years at the Senior Bowl. So we all paid a price on Monday or Tuesday, whatever the hell that day was out there.
Yeah, that cool weather moved through and just like torched our skin.
Yeah, and then it rained. Yeah, right, the next day. Yeah.
Man, so, we had our Senior Bowl wrap-up show a couple weeks back, talked about some players, some stories. What kind of takeaways did you have from that week of practice, the game, some of the storylines that caught your attention?
I watched a lot of the lines, both the tackles and then some of the interior guys, mostly offensive line, but I watched a lot of just the lines in general. A couple guys, I mentioned DeJuan Jones earlier, Cody Maw, the North Dakota State, the young kid there. He's guard center. I think he snapped for the first time ever in Mobile. I'm not sure if he's ever done that, but he looked pretty good to me. I actually think I would have had him maybe behind the kid from Minnesota as maybe the best center there. I mean, he was one of the best centers there. He was really impressive. Another kid that I thought stood out from Chattanooga. I always forget his name. I'm going to pull it up.
McClendon Curtis, right?
Yeah, Curtis. Yes, McClendon Curtis who was awesome. I mean, they put him, I think, both guard spots. He kicked out and played some tackle. He's got a ton of length, moves really well. I think he did not, I don't think, get a combine invite. I'm not sure if he did or didn't.
He's going to be there.
A bummer. Is he going to be there? Good. Okay.
Yep.
So I think he'll actually climb even higher after the combine. But I think a lot of those guys did well for themselves. Another one that you mentioned, like, who could help themselves more, Will McDonald from Iowa State. I mean, my God, that guy, I'm not sure if I saw too many people other than maybe Matthew Bergeron, who's another one who I think helped himself a ton. Too many people get him at all in any one-on-one scenario. And if they did, he got him again on the very next rep. So a lot of really good linemen, I felt like, and corners, but a lot of really good linemen at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I completely agree. Both those guys that you named off, McClendon Curtis, Cody Mock, were guys that I came away as very impressed by. Guys that I haven't watched too much of, guys that I know too much about.
Yeah, they're really good.
But, reading into their bios, you talk about guys that have leadership, guys that have tangibles, guys that have intangibles, guys that have, a ton of play history, tough guys, versatile guys, which you touched on.
Yeah.
McClendon Curtis played both guard spots. I think he lined up at 4 different positions. Cody Mock lined up at 5 different positions throughout the week, including the game. So, I mean, those guys are really interesting to me. I think Cody Mock got the national offensive lineman practice player of the week.
That sounds right.
Seemed to be kind of a, locker room favorite, fan favorite type of kid. Probably not to the level of the kid from Wisconsin last year, but
no, he was like a light version of that. He had the belly, but it wasn't like the full hockey. So he's got the hair too, and the teeth and all that. So I think he'll be a good story. And I think more people will get to know him. Certainly after the combine too, right? Like he's a guy. Steve Avila is another one that was ringing around in my head there as I was talking. Another guy who's played multiple spots in college. Right. I don't know if he can play outside of tackle, but like he's a lot of really good, like solid linemen. I felt like at the Senior Bowl, good receivers too and corners, but there always are. I feel like that's a receiver corner event. Sometimes the linemen struggle, and this didn't feel like that in this one.
Completely agree. And with Steve Avila, I feel like I don't know how you felt watching the national title game. To me, was the only guy that was able to hold his breath.
Yeah. Him and Horton on the other side, the other, right. Who I like him a lot. But yeah, Avila was like that against Michigan. He was like that against Georgia. And he was like that in every game they played. Like so much got made of Duggan, obviously, right? And Quentin Johnston, who's a terrific athlete as well. But I mean, Avila was one of those guys that when it came down to it, if they needed 4 yards, they just ran behind him. Or Duggan found him and tucked behind him and they got a first down. Like that's how they played. For sure. Tough guy.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of the combine, what's your plans? Are you heading down there? Are you going to watch it from afar?
I will be there. I'm not sure for how long. They've changed the format, right? So I think I'm interested to see how this goes because the bench press is now after all of the running. So it used to be, right? The bench it used to be before. I think they would come in, they would interview and bench press on the same day. Then the next day they would run. Now, because I think that a lot of guys were using the excuse of, you're making me wait till my final day here to run. I'm not going to run. Now they're making them run earlier, bench later. So I'm curious to see how that goes. But I'll be there for part of it at least. I think the combine has become one of those things where it's like you can't do the full. It's too long. It's way too much, and a lot of it is frankly not really worth it because you don't get to see everything.
Yeah, 100%. It's become a production.
Yeah. Senior Bowl is way better, or the Shrine Game, or an All-Star Game practice.
Right. Access is a lot better. Unless you know people on the inside and you're able to you rub some elbows at the old Union Station, across the way there. It's really hard to
like I was talking to somebody yesterday. I was like, the combine is not irrelevant. It's relevant. There are things that need to be done at the combine. Teams need to get things done, but all the things that are important are things that we don't get to see, the medicals, the interviews. Right. So, it is what it is. One of those things.
Right. Which is the most important part of all that kind of stuff. I mean, the Underwear Olympics is fun for, all the fans out there that want to talk about 40 times and stuff, bench press reps and everything else. But for all these executives, all these scouts, all these coordinators, all these GMs, everybody else getting a chance to sit down with the guy in front of the board, interview him, the medic staff, be able to, get all their answers,
right.
Because it matters. It 100% matters,
time. I mean, look at a guy like DeJuan Jones, right? Like if he's the wingspan on him is 90 some, whatever, 89. your medical staff, like if my medical staff would need to really go over every single, he's a big guy, right? Like you need that objective. So I think that that's something that gets lost in a lot of the conversation about, the combine, but that is still something that we absolutely need going forward.
Exactly. You got a situation where you have an owner that's about to pony up,
right,
tens of millions of dollars in guaranteed money for a first round pick, and about $10 million for a second round pick in guaranteed money. And then, obviously the level at the, bottom kind of drops out after that. But for those first 2 round guys, man, all those answers better be there, or else, I mean, you're wasting a bunch of money. Your fan base going to end up getting pissed off. You're not going to be able to pay for other contracts. What are you specifically looking forward to seeing next week? Whether it be, a storyline play out, a player to watch live, wherever the case may be. What do you have your eyes on?
I want to see, I guess we'll see how everybody is health-wise. I want to see how obviously how the quarterbacks throw. I want to see how Will Levis and Richardson, how they do under pressure. Because I think that's the other thing that we don't talk about enough is, when a quarterback throws at his pro day, he gets to design the workout. He gets to control the whole thing. At the combine, there's a lot less you get to control. So to see those guys go through that whole thing, and then to see some of these guys run, I'm always, Darnell Washington, the kid from Georgia, the huge tight end. I want to see all the stuff that he does. We mentioned Van Ness would be another one. Mozzie Smith, the kid from Michigan. I think he's going to have a freaky week. Every year, Musgrave, the tight end from Oregon State, I think he's going to have a week where people are turning heads on him. There's a lot of guys every single year that come in here and set those marks a little bit higher, which is why our testing probably needs to evolve, right? We probably need some new tests, but it should be fun either way.
Nick, you guys are talking about the combine, and you had a great article the other day on historically black college universities having their own combine this week. What can you tell us about who performed well? Have you gotten reports on anyone? You in your article at the Athletic, you did a great job of previewing some of the people that scouts might be paying really close attention to. But what have you heard about the performances down at the combine?
I have to check on all of that. I was actually going to check on the measurements because that's something that we get the officials on all of that. But I did see, Dejon Warren, the kid from Jackson State, the corner, the kid that's opposite Hunter. He's really good. I think he's one that I believe was committed to Georgia after JUCO. So he was going to leave JUCO, go to Georgia. And then after that, Deion flipped him. So, I mean, and this kid is a really good, solid 6'1" or 6'6". That's why I'm curious to see what the measurements are on some of those. But a really good player. And I think that he moved around really well for some scouts, and we heard good things about him. He's one that, like, of all the guys that I put on that list, the kid from Bowie State, Pryor, is a nice player too. But Warren would be one that I almost feel like, I don't think he got a combine invite, but I almost wonder if he should have gotten a combine invite. I'm not sure if he did or not, but he's a nice player.
Danny?
Yeah, having covered, obviously, or being in Detroit, I should say, with the Lions, obviously, what happened last year in terms of how they kind of, came out, knocked the Packers out at the end, which I was rooting for, by the way. But what do you think they're going to do to take the next step in this offseason? Is it attack? I mean, I'm not sure what their cap situation is. Are they going to be active in free agency? Are they going to look to kind of just continue building through the draft? What's the forecast for Detroit here coming up?
So I think that, they'll have money to spend more than they've had under Brad Holmes. I think this will be the most they've had. I don't think it's like the most or anything like that, but it's enough. It's enough to go out. And I think that they'll spend some on defense. I would expect them to probably sign a corner somewhere. I kind of think they should sign a linebacker. I'm not sure if they will, but I kind of feel like they should. But I definitely think we'll see them sign at least one corner, maybe both. And I think also we could see them draft multiple corners. I think obviously finding a corner in the first round there with one of those two picks feels as close to a necessity as we've seen out of any of the Lions picks in this regime here. And it's a good year to have that, I guess, because you've got Porter, you got Witherspoon, you got Gonzalez. I think any of those guys would be good fits for Detroit, and they need more than one. They need like three, frankly. So they have a lot of holes still to fill on the defensive side. But the offense, I mean, it's pretty good when everything clicks. I mean, it's ready to go in a lot of places. So we'll see how Jamison Williams comes together too. this offseason. That'll be big for him. See how he runs around in the spring and such. But I would expect him to spend more this year. Yeah, we'll see where it all pans out, though.
Well, one potential free agent that I have had my eye on or earmarked for the Bears probably sneaking in and maybe signing him is DJ Shark. And then I feel like he's a guy that throughout his career is giving you that deep speed, that deep threat, playmaking ability. I know he had some inconsistencies with injuries and all that stuff. So, what's the forecast in Detroit for DJ Shark? Are they going to try and re-sign him? Is he a guy that the Bears could and may target in terms of bringing some of that big play element here?
That's a really good question. I think that I know they like him a lot. Like, he's a really good dude. And I think that he's one that I think he would be a really good fit for a team exactly like Chicago. And for that exact reason, I wonder if he gets more money than the Lions are willing to spend to bring him back. And that would be something that I've almost wondered, because they have so many picks in the top 3 rounds, where receiver falls on their, sort of draft list as well, because they've got guys on prove it deals. Josh Reynolds is another one that's been on one, but Chark was on the biggest prove it deal. I think it was up and down. He had some injuries, but when he was healthy and he finished the year healthy and played really well for them down the stretch and was himself, I felt like down the stretch. He's a really good player, comes back to the ball, underrated in a lot of areas up in the air, and just a really, really good guy. Like, I think he helped them a ton. They had not problems, but they were worried earlier in the year about, losing Jameson Williams because he was not, there every day. He was hurt. But I think Chark was really big with helping keep him involved and all that. So good locker room guy too to have on your team.
Yeah, that's definitely a player that I've earmarked. And again, he's a guy, he's been in the league for I think 4 years now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so a Pro Bowler, for I believe his rookie or second year, one of the two.
Yeah, and then,
he can run when he's healthy. Yeah,
and then it just seems like a guy I think the Bears are going to be targeting guys that are in that mid 20s, and not guys in the 30s. And so I know that's a guy that they're looking for, guys that can create some separation, and obviously with his speed, big play ability, I think he's a guy that they can target. So. I just got word that Aldo lost power. So we were talking about and all that stuff. Man. So Aldo has lost power. He's gonna go ahead and try and jump on. Neil, do you have another question for our guest here tonight?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you have any birdies in your ear telling you any sort of inside deals of what's going to happen with that first pick.
No, I mean I have wondered as much as everybody else. I don't. My biggest question that I guess I would have going in quarterback wise next week is how much are teams willing to give up to go make sure they can get Bryce Young, or if they like Stroud or whatever it may be. But I think Young is probably going to be the consensus guy, and I'm not sure it's going to be enough. Maybe, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough. I'm not on the slam dunk. They're going to have the Godfather deal to be able to realistically say, okay, we're going to move down and get out of here for whatever you get back. I mean, obviously, I think that would be the best scenario involved, and I think it's very possible. And I think that's one of those things that you never know until the day, because teams will lie, they make stuff up, and next week's going to be even, it's going to crank through the roof with some of that too. But I look at the position Chicago's in right now, and worst case scenario is you draft Jalen Carter. And to me, that's pretty good. You know what I mean? Where it's like, man, you just put that pole right in the ground and say, you're not running on us. I don't care about anything else. We'll figure out the rest as we go. The Lions did that with Penei Sewell, and I loved it when they did that with him. And it was they didn't take Fields. If you guys remember, I mean, they could have at the time. I mean, a lot of us thought maybe they will, and they didn't. Wouldn't have been a bad pick, but they weren't ready for him, and they took Sewell, put it in the ground, and go. I think that if you can't make a trade, that's what I'd probably do, is take Carter. I mean, he's a really good player. I think the character stuff, I have not heard that. I don't know where that all comes from. And frankly, if he is nasty, I really don't care either. I think that would be probably good for him. Right? Like, I think he's a really good player. And I think that, like, worst case scenario, it's a good year to have that pick. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I've sort of thought about it for Chicago. You're not going to get a dud. Like, that's not going to happen there either way. And if they can trade down and get one of those guys, all the better. But yeah, we'll see. But that's one I'm curious to see it too. Like, how much does Bryce Young help himself? Does he become a guy where teams say, we have to go get him? He's generational. I don't know if he's that guy. I mean, I think he's QB1 in this draft, but I'm not sure if he's the guy that you're going all in for your whole life to go get. So I guess we'll see how it goes.
Right.
One thing
me and Danny are also on the same page with that. I think in terms of, I know Danny, you have like all kinds of gripe with people on Twitter right now suggesting different draft scenarios for Justin Fields and other people saying that he's not the guy and everything else.
I won't even acknowledge those questions.
No, you shouldn't either. I mean, those are foolish.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Fields is terrific. I mean, he's going to be fine. Yeah.
I'm kind of with you. I don't think there is a true generational quarterback in this draft. I think Bryce by default is QB1,
and he's good. I don't want to say that he's not. He's very good, but I'm not sure that I would. You know what I mean? And I could be wrong. There could be a team that says, like Indy or something, could say we want to make sure that we don't get this wrong. And they could just say we're going all in. We don't care because they have a team that, if they put Bryce Young on their roster, they'd be right back in it. You know what I mean? Maybe they're willing to 100%. Give up all that. And then if you're Chicago, you just sit there and you get Carter or Anderson, one of the two, and on you go with a load of picks. So I think they're in a good spot either way. I really do. I don't think that top. I wish they had that one at the bottom of the first. I still wish or the top of the second, whatever the hell that is. I wish they had that still.
That could get you a lot.
That's a stinger because that really could help them a ton. Could really speed things up for them. Yeah.
The one team that no one talks about, but I think it's lying in the weeds there is the Panthers. Keep an eye on Carolina. They're number 9.
Yeah, I think if they can make a move to go up, and I think that they probably are ready to do that. I would hope so. After all these years of waffling, but I think that they have what it takes to do it. And Detroit and Seattle, I think would be more than willing to trade. So I think it's there if they want to do it.
With the new coach there and the fact that today the new Evero, the defensive coordinator, said that they're switching to a 3-4 base scheme, which obviously we all know they're a 4-3. So maybe Ryan Burns now becomes available, and you can use him as a chip to the Bears to move.
You know what? That is interesting. I did hear about a little something about that the other day. Maybe that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Ryan Carolina. Looks like we got Aldo back. Hey, Aldo.
Yeah, I lost my connection there and scrambled back, so I apologize if my next question has already been addressed. But Nick, I was wondering, on one of your latest articles over at The Athletic, you posted your big board 3.0, and one of the comments made by you and or your co-author on that piece is that currently the big board, you thought perhaps wide receivers were being overvalued on this board and that cornerbacks were undervalued. Can you expound on that a little more? And I know that Ryan Poles, the Bears general manager, has said that he's going to be looking heavily at the premium positions, and he included cornerback. So I'm wondering if you've got a couple of cornerback names for us that we could potentially look at on early day 3.
Yeah, it's a great corner class at the top. And like you say, like Ryan said, the premium spots for corner. And the receiver thing, the consensus board, which we take probably 15 or 20, whatever it is, and put them together, still way too high, I feel like, on Addison and Quentin Johnston and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Those are probably the top 3. You can argue on some of the other ones or whatever, maybe in there too. Jalen Hyatt, maybe. But I feel like all of them are too high. I feel like you can wait on all of them. You can always wait on receivers, Flowers in the second round, Downs in the second round. Those are really good players too. And I just feel like no one is going to be in any rush to do that. I don't see any generational type, prospect here unless, something changes in somebody's mind one or the other. But the corners, I think, are being a little bit slept on, as we often see this time of year. I think that could pick up. Like Christian Gonzalez is going to run really well. Devin Witherspoon, he's a tape guy, you watch his tape. I mean, there's just no real holes to his game. Joey Porter's got all that length, and he hits and runs. Banks, the kid from Maryland's really good. Forbes from Mississippi State. And then on and on. I mean, there were guys at the Senior Bowl. Darius Rush from South Carolina, I thought was one of the best players, period, at the Senior Bowl.
Absolutely.
You can go all the way down into like the middle of the third round and get probably a guy that could start right now. Like, that's what I feel like for the most part there. So after that, it gets a little dicey, but I mean, like, I agree with him. Like, it's a really good year to need a corner or to need multiple corners, because there are a lot of them who I think are game ready and ready to go.
Got a question from J2K. He says, what round range do you see Olu Oluwatimi going, and do you think he's a starting center in the NFL?
That was a question I had going into the Senior Bowl, and I thought was he going to be a guy who could push himself into day 2? And I didn't think that he did enough there. I just didn't. I thought that he struggled with some of the things that I had questions about in terms of speed, in terms of, is he showing enough power against some of the bigger and more powerful guys at the point of attack? And I think it was too much stalemate for my liking there, which is fine, I guess, to a degree. And I think he'll still be a high day 3 pick. Like, I think that he is a capable center, and I think he's a guy that is going to be smart enough, depending on where he lands, that if he finds himself in a spot where he has to start a game, I don't know how well it would go, but I think he could get through it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that as a rookie, he'll be able to figure it out and find his way through it. He's a really smart player. That's what I would say the most about him, and that's why I was hesitant to totally ding him after the Senior Bowl, because that's just a 1 week. That you don't really have an advantage cerebrally there. Like, he came to Michigan and learned their whole scheme in like 2 months, which is super crazy to have that whole thing picked up, and was phenomenal. So he could surprise people. I think that he could be a pretty good player when it's all said and done, and a valuable guy too. The one thing I wish he'd showed a little bit more foot speed, because I feel like he's only a center. I don't know if he could be a guard at the next level. And that's where I was kind of wondering if he could show that.
Yeah, you hit on 2 points on him real quick, Aldo. Do you want to jump in here real quick? Because I've been studying him as well. Very interesting background. Obviously started at Air Force, went to Virginia, started for 3 years, and so he's a 4-year starter basically in college.
Really good player.
Very smart kid. Yeah, his physicality at the line of scrimmage, I think on tape, you can see it. He's got the strengths, but for me, I see him more as a gap power scheme kind of player, not a guy like the Bears are looking here for the wide zone stuff, right? Because
like if Baltimore needed a center, he'd be good there. Right?
Exactly. They don't. The Ravens. I'm thinking maybe even Dallas. They use, I don't know about now with McCarthy, but they use a lot of power, gap blocking. So I think he's a nice fit there. But definitely an interesting kid, and definitely a guy I think has his strong suits, but he's got to be fit in the right system,
right? For sure, I agree with that.
Tony, the pod boss, is asking if you could give an NFL player comp for Ozzie Smith, who would it be, Nick?
Oh man, I'm not sure. I hate the comps, but I don't know, because I feel like we haven't seen, and this is what I would say. I don't know, because I don't think we've seen his best stuff yet. I think he is one of the like one of the arrow, and after the combine, I think it's going to be even higher. But I think Bruce Feldman had him on his number 1 on the freaks list last year. And I've been watching him since he was in high school. And I remember all he had was just punch and power and all that explosion off the line and all that in the lower half. He is a freaky guy who I think didn't figure it out until really late in his career at Michigan. I mean, you're not talking maybe a year and a half ago, and I was wondering, is he going to get drafted? Like, because what a waste that would be, right? If he can't figure it out. And it wasn't for any other, I mean, he's a good kid. I think they all like him in there. It was just, he was really raw. And so that's why I would say there's a really high ceiling there. And I think he's going to be a guy that at worst is hard to move. You know what I mean? So I think that he's going to be, I'm not sure he gets out of the 30s. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's where we're talking about with him. And that could be on the rise after next week for sure.
Yeah. The only question with Smith is because right now he's going to be a run stuffing defensive tackle. The question is, can he give you more in terms of pass rush? And I think I agree with you, Nick. I think he wasn't utilized to his full potential at Michigan. I think he gives you some more in terms of being able to pierce those gaps, get upfield, and be a penetrator. If allowed to. I think he was doing a lot more two gapping there in Michigan. So I think that stopped him. But that's a kid that if you get him, you said 30s, but if you get him in a 3rd or 4th round, I think you could potentially have a starter here.
And if you put him next to somebody else who's good, like that's really where we're talking. You know what I mean? Like because at Michigan, like you said, I mean, even if it's not 2 gap, they were gap and a half. So if you're putting him somewhere next to someone that's good and you just let him go 1-on-1, he could be really, really explosive right away.
J2K bought the 2 questions for 1 package. He asked, what position do you think Mike Morris ends up on the defensive line in the NFL? 4-3 edge, 3-4-5 tech? Any thoughts on that?
I think he's like a 4-3-5 tech. I think he's like a heavy edge. But I'm curious to see how he runs. I am very interested to see how he runs. He is one of those guys that just like, he gets it done, I guess. He piles up pressure numbers, and you look at the numbers every week, and it would be, there he is again, there he is again, there he is again, like Aiden Hutchinson level pressure numbers. And Morris, the knock on Hutchinson was always, everything is hustle, which was not correct. Morris, I worry a lot of it is hustle. It's because he plays so hard. I'm really curious to see how he tests. Because if he tests really well, I think Dane likes him more than I do, actually. If he tests well, then I think that, the stock would be up on him too. Because if he shows that he can get out and move a little bit and play and drop and cover, because they didn't really ask him to ever do that at Michigan. I think Hutchinson rarely did it, maybe twice, like his entire Michigan career. But I don't think Morris really ever did. If he can show some of that, then I think that versatility really opens up, and I think things get a little different for him.
Niel, do you got a final question for Nick? And then I'll ask Danny the same question.
Yeah, sure. It's not really a question, more like a comment. But when I go on your Twitter page, the one thing you have in your bio that really sticks out is my top source is your tape. We talk all the time about how the tape is really the main thing that matters in the evaluation process. Right. These underwear Olympic type events are great and everything else. And like we touched on earlier, what's great about these things is you're able to get kids in the room with you, get them on the board, get the medical staff with them and everything else. But when it comes down to it, what you see on tape is what you got to go and make decisions off of, how you organize your board and everything else. And that is from, team to team all across the league. Between me and Danny, we do this professionally and everyone else like us. That's just the way that it works, man. It's like all this other minutia, all these other things that are floating around the internet and Twitter sphere, everything else doesn't matter. It's all about the tape. And, I just appreciated that quote. I wanted to go ahead and point that out because I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Danny?
And for me, is since Nick and I agree on the Justin Fields angle, I need another angle that I need him. Maybe he can back me up on this one as well, because I've been battling my Twitter followers and the same thing here. Please, Nick, tell me you do not agree with giving Saquon Barkley a contract and just going and let's draft a running back. I do not give running backs, I don't care how great they are, long term, especially coming off ACL.
The ACL gives me pause. But he's like the one guy that I would make the exception.
Oh, Nick, we were
doing
so well together.
He's the one guy because especially with that team right now too. You know what I mean? Like they're in a bit of a spot there. I feel like I get you though. I get where you're coming from because it's like, I think that there's more you can get out of Saquon than we've seen with the Giants, even than what they've run for him. When I think of him, I think of a guy that can catch the ball and do some things like that too, but at the same time, he's going to take a lot more punishment. He's already had the injuries. That's tough. It's a tough spot for the Giants too, because they really can't afford to lose much talent. They made it to where they were last year, on really good coaching, and that was pretty much it. And Saquon, and that was pretty much it. So, I don't know. That's a tough one. But like I would have said similar about Zeke Elliott a couple years ago, and I wouldn't now. So, the injury history is definitely troubling. So, I'm probably coming around. Probably closer to you, Danny, than I would. But I love him. I think he's an awesome player, like one of the best with the ball in his hands that we've seen in the last 10, 15 years. But
the talent is unquestionable. But he wants 14, 15 million a year for multiple years. And plus
depends on how many years, right? Like how many years? Like 3? Like what, 6? Like, I don't know about that, So
the other thing is, for me, I don't know if you agree, I think this is a heavy or deep running back class. I think you can get a guy on day 3 that can come in and compete and be potentially a starter for you, if not first year, second year for sure. So that's what I'm saying. You already have Khalil Herbert. If you lose David Montgomery, to go ahead and you have so many holes up front. Now, if the Bears will run one player away, one running back away, that's a different story.
Right.
But they have the offensive, defensive line issues, not to mention depth on other positions. So that's why I keep telling people, like, you cannot just, you have the money. Doesn't mean you have to spend it all in one off season. So you got to be smart.
I would not sign him. I'm talking about if I were the Giants, I would do that, not the Bears. No, to be clear, absolutely not. No way. Because I totally agree with you. Actually, and Herbert is one of the most underrated players in the NFL. I feel like he is a guy that for the Lions, I always look at and I'm like, if they ever drop him, like I feel like that would be the guy that I would bounce on. But no, Chicago, they have other problems. Not that. That's not something that's going to fix anything for them.
They have a lot of other problems.
They have a lot of other issues for sure. Part of the problem.
Nick, this has been a blast talking to you. Please tell our followers where they can find you on social media and anything that you got coming up on The Athletic that we should be keeping an eye for.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Nick Baumgardner. Just how it is, NickBaumgardner. Also on Instagram at Nick Baumgardner FB, and TikTok, same thing. And then I've got a mock draft actually coming next week, I believe. So stay tuned for that, and probably some more stuff from the combine. So should be fun.
Do you have the Bears trading down in your upcoming mock?
Not yet, but we still have time. I haven't filed it yet, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Indeed. All right, Nick, we'll let you go, and we will be right back after this quick message. Hey everyone, want to let you know that Danny Shimon and Niel Stopczynski are co-hosting a private draft talk party. That's right, it's private. For 90 minutes, you can join the Draft on Tap co-hosts and get the type of quality draft talk you yearn for as much as I yearn for my Maker's Mark. You lead the discussion. Talk about your favorite prospect and get Danny and Niel's analysis. If you want, share your favorite mock with the guys or bring up a prospect off everyone's radar. The cost is only a $10 donation, or as we say here at the Barroom, a $10 cover charge. You'll get 90 minutes of your personalized draft talk and even get a copy of the video to share with your friends. Now, there are only 7 slots available. That's right, only 7, so you must act fast. What you need to do is email me at aldo@bearsbarroom.com. Tell me you want to party with the guys, and I'll get you the information you need. The party is Wednesday, March 1st at 8 p.m. Central, so don't hesitate. It's only a $10 donation, the cost of a beer and a shot of whiskey. I still wonder, really, $10 for a beer and a shot of whiskey? Not Neil's part of this, that's for sure.
Well, and then the line says party with the guys.
You find yourself.
I think of something different when you say party with the guys.
Yeah. That too. But we do have a couple of slots left over, so hopefully we can fill those. I know lots of people have been inquiring about the date, the time, cancellation policy, and so forth. So just hit me up at aldo@bearsbarroom.com, and I'll answer all your questions, and we'll get this party started next Wednesday at this time. Next Wednesday. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
You know, people have a lot of questions. People have prospects they want to talk about. People have mock drafts they want to take a look at, and And the only thing I ask about the mock drafts is let's keep it to a reasonable amount of picks. We don't want 20 picks here to go through, guys. I know that the trade machine gives you a lot of different scenarios there. So let's keep it to a more realistic in terms of overall draft class. I don't think Ryan Poles is coming out with 25 picks out of the draft, but hey, you never know.
No, it's funny because
things have happened.
Really, true. But there was a guy on Twitter who posted his mock draft, and he had it was close to 20. I didn't count them, but it had to be around 20 draft picks because he kept trading down and trading down and trading down. And I'm like, really? Do you really think that's ever going to happen? Any team in NFL history, that's never happened. I think the biggest thing was the Ricky Williams Saints trade where they traded the entire draft for somebody, but that still didn't amount to 20 draft picks. So it certainly gets ridiculous. So hopefully you guys can join us, Barflies, join us at the party, bring your mock drafts, bring your questions. You guys will be the stars of this. And then you'll also walk away with your own copy of the video so that you can share with friends, because it will not be live on the Barroom Network. This is a private party, so really looking forward to your involvement on that. All right, guys, it is time for us in the last few minutes here of the show to talk about the Combine and what you're expecting to see, what you're hoping to see, and were there any players who were not invited to the Combine that you are disappointed that they're not going to be there next week? So, Danny, we'll start with you.
Yeah, in terms of the Combine, I have a lot of thoughts, so I'm going to try and narrow them down here for you. I know because I only have a couple minutes left, but in terms of just the snubs, the guys that I'm surprised weren't there, and I'm curious to hear Neil's thoughts on these guys as well. The first guy I have is Carl Brooks, the defensive tackle from Bowling Green. I think he showed well over at the Senior Bowl last week or 2 weeks ago, and I think he's a guy that during the practices continued to kind of stick out, and I think he continued to make plays. Put on his tape. He's a guy that's athletic. They use him, as an outside edge rusher and from a 2-point stance at Bowling Green. But he's a guy that is going to at 303, 6'3", 303. He's going to probably kick in the defensive tackle. So he's a guy that I was surprised didn't show up. Aubrey Miller, guys, the linebacker from Jackson State, he was all over the field in terms of the Senior Bowl practices, even the 7-on-7s, even the team drills. You see him coming in and knocking that ball out with the peanut punch. So he's a kid that, a little bit undersized at 5'11", 229, but, the Bears are in the market for, some linebackers here. So, that could be a guy to keep an eye on. Unfortunately, he won't be at the combine, but, as the process continues, Aubrey Miller from Jackson State is the guy to keep an eye on. Marte Mapu is the safety from Sacramento State that really kind of took off, made a name for himself at the Collegiate Bowl, and then was invited down to Mobile. And he's a guy that was just thumping guys at the Senior Bowl. So he's a big safety from Sacramento State, 6'3", 217. Some see him as a tweener, possibly a linebacker, slash safety. So interesting. He's a guy that didn't get the call in. A guy that I saw personally over at the East-West Shrine game is offensive tackle Trevor Reed from Louisville. The guy's got the size in terms of 6'4", 297, 34 plus inch arm length. He's a guy that could, play left tackle, could even kick inside the guard possibly, but he's showed the athletic ability to at least, be tried out there at left tackle. So he's a guy that didn't come up. And finally, he's BJ Thompson, the edge guy from Stephen F. Austin, a guy who had a sack in the East-West Shrine game, got key with length, 6'5", 238, 34 plus inch arms, quick off the snap. So these are some of the guys that for me were omitted that I thought should be, should have been invited at least to the combine and participated there. So those are my snubs. I'm curious to see what Niel thinks. And then in terms of the guys that I'm looking forward to, Aldo is offensively is the guy I saw down in the East-West Shrine game. Antoine Green, North Carolina, big receiver, 6'2", 201. Kid averaged 19 yards a catch this past season. Didn't have that many yards in terms of, I think, 500 yards. But he had 7 touchdowns. The season before, 18 yards per reception. So he's another kid to look at. The question with him, along with the other guy I'm looking at here, is A.T. Perry from Wake Forest. They're bigger receivers. The question is their speed. If Perry runs anywhere in the 4.5s, I think he's going in the second round. That's how much of a big playmaker he is, down the football field. And I think Green as well. He runs in a high 4.5. He's a guy that can get second, third round, not second round, probably third, fourth round consideration. But definitely a guy that's made plays, throughout his collegiate career. I know that's a huge position we're looking at. So obviously Jordan Addison from USC, I want to see him go through all the drills. He's a guy that had up and down season coming off the Blitnikoff award from last year at Pitt when he was with a quarterback that Kenny Pickett that the Steelers drafted. So he had a great year, went to USC, had up and down year. He's a guy that to me coming into this process was my number one receiver, but I want to see him go out there. I want to see him, put on a show, show that he's going to go ahead and compete and go through all the drills. So that's a kid. Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee obviously came on this year as a gangbuster, won the Blitnikoff this year. He's a big play potential guy. He's a guy that I've heard has been telling people he's going to run a 4.2 flat. So I want to see him go out there and see if he can do that. Because if he does that, that's a guy that talking about the Bears bringing in possibly second round as a guy that can bring you big play, deep speed, home run potential there. Cedric Tillman, his teammate at Tennessee, is a guy I really like. Another guy that had ankle surgery this year, up and down season, didn't put the stats up that everyone expected, but he's a guy, different kind of cat in terms of him and Hyatt. Hyatt's more of that deep vertical speed guy. Tillman's more of that big body guy that can catch through contact, a guy that could be a potential number one receiver down the line. Michael Wilson, a kid from Stanford that, Niel, I think you and I both agreed on, showed some, something there at the Senior Bowl, 6'2", 2+, 100 pounds, in terms of creating some separation. And in terms of his release at the line of scrimmage was impressive for me. So that's a guy, again, had some up and downs in terms of injuries at his career at Stanford. So those are the offensive guys that I'm really looking at. I have a ton of more here, guys, in terms of offensive receivers, so I'm going to kind of limit it short here. But to offensive line, the one guy that I'm really looking forward to, guys, is Peter Skoronski. I want to see what his measurables are. Does he have the length? I've heard under 32. I've heard 33 over. Athletically, he looks like he could play the left tackle position. If we talk about different trade scenarios with the Bears, if they do trade down to that 9, 10, 11 spot, it could be a position where you bring in a kid like Skoronski, or he can maybe play left guard for you. You can go ahead and either trade or get rid of Whitehair, and then have your future left side there manned up with Braxton Jones and Skoronski. So that's a player I'm keeping an eye on there on the offensive end. So I don't know if you want me to throw it over to Niel, have him go over some of his players, and before I go on defense, I just go through my list right now. Aldo, what do you want me to do here?
Throw it over to Niel. That way we don't lose him.
No, I'm just laughing because I love how Danny starts off with like a really complicated last name and just kind of holds on to his ass throughout the rest of it. Sure. Yeah, Peter's Chris. You know,
you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Hey, his team on defensive side, I just call him Double A. That's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
Hey, it's an endearing quality about you, kid. I appreciate it. But no, I mean,
Skoronsky, right? Skoronsky. Yeah.
Skoronsky. There you go.
Nice Polish name.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Gotta learn how to pronounce that stuff after being with me for 2 years. Snubs wise, right there with you, man. Like the first one that I looked at that list and thought of was the Carl Brooks kid from Bowling Green. I mean, I don't understand how you leave a kid off with those type of measurables, with that kind of performance. And not to say that he blew Senior Bowl week out of the water by any stretch of the imagination, but he was there. He went through all the drills. He wasn't one of those guys that only performed practice and didn't play the game, or went through a day or two of practice and was kind of pondering whether or not he was going to play the game or not. Did everything. And he did it with great effort, and he has some really good energy, and he has all the measurables, and he went through an entire career at Bowling Green with incredible production. So I feel like that was like the one big miss to me that I'm looking at that list and thinking to myself, how in the hell is this kid not in here? Overlooked Aubrey Miller a little bit, not gonna lie, but he was a kid that I didn't really know too much about going into Senior Bowl week, that I saw that liked a little bit, was a guy that I wanted to keep an eye on. I was looking for Isaiah Land, and I thought, holy cow, they're not including this kid into the combine. But then I looked at the defensive line list, and they included him with the D line, which I don't think he's going to be. I think he's going to be an interior linebacker. He's a little bit of an undersized kid, and with his kind of athletic ability, you want that kid in space, I think. So I think that was interesting to me. The Mapu kid, once you brought it up, I thought was an incredible miss as well from Sac State. That being said, I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of these guys move around next week. I mean, I have a massive list again, like, Danny said, I'm going to try and keep this kind of consolidated and concise. Some of these offensive guys at the Senior Bowl, specifically the linemen, that I want to see move around in drills that I didn't get to see enough of. I wanted to see more of, like we talked about with Nick McClendon Curtis from Chattanooga. I want to see what he tests at. I want to see like how he does in some offensive line specific drills. Asim Richards is one that worked out at 5 different positions from North Carolina. I think he played the game at left tackle, but he worked out at, like I said, all 5 different positions. Did a really good job, especially in the one-on-ones. Holding his own against bigger, stronger, faster dudes. Osiris Torrance is that big body left guard, the All-American from Florida, that I want to see how he does, moving around in the agilities, and to see if he's a guy that can work out in Chicago. Darnell Wright was a kid that I absolutely loved. And, again, we thought that, he didn't win every single rep of one-on-ones. We thought he looked a little bit stiff at times. I loved his competitive nature. I loved his toughness and his prick mentality. And those are the type of dudes that I want in the locker room. So if he does a good enough job in these agility drills, I would definitely want him in Chicago. Some of the offensive linemen that weren't there, the little bit more high-profile guys, like Paris Johnson from Ohio State, Broderick Jones from Georgia, I think it's going to absolutely demolish the competition in all these agility drills and in the 40 and in the explosion drills, everything else. That kid's been athletic for days. It was just a matter of him putting on enough weight to play, outside in the SEC. Peter Skoronsky, like Danny said, looking forward to see like what he measures in at, how he performs. And all these things. I think he's another guy that's going to absolutely blow the thing away. Andrew Voorhees from USC, Luke Weipler from Ohio State, Brandon Downs from Utah. There's some other guys that I haven't really got a whole lot of opinion on yet, that I'm still formulating and want to see measurables, want to see them move around in drills and things of that nature. On the other side of the line, defensively, the guy that's going to absolutely blow away the competition, Tommy Adebawore from Northwestern. Another name that I'd love to hear Danny say 3 times fast.
Double A.
Absolutely.
Double A. That's what I'm going to call him.
Double A. There you go. Double A. Go to AA. AA meetings with Tommy Adebawore is going to be interesting, I think, all week for a lot of these scouts and executives, and just to get him on the board and just get him in person. I think it's going to be an absolutely outstanding interview. And I think he's going to really blow some people away with his personality, with his particular character. And then Keanu Benton is another guy I'm expecting to absolutely tear this combine up. Dylan Horton's going to have absurd numbers. Will McDonald's going to have absurd numbers. Both those guys did really well during the week. Will McDonald, I think, was my defensive player of the week, to be honest with you. The more I think about it, the more I go back in the film and look at it. I really like everything that he did. You got some really versatile guys like Keon White, like Lucas Van Ness. That's going to be there. What's my other guy there that I really like, versatility wise? I'm blanking, but that's okay. Keon White from Georgia Tech was down there in Mobile. Lucas Van Ness, we talked about a little bit tonight from Iowa. He's going to have great measurables. He's going to have great athleticism. He's a guy that's going to be able to project a few different ways. Just a matter of how you want to go ahead and throw him into your mix. Isaiah Land, I think, is a guy that could potentially work at the second level. I don't know if he's going to be able to work for us, but I want to see him do linebacker stuff. I don't want to just see him do defensive line stuff. I want to see him do linebacker stuff because I think that's where he really popped to me throughout the week down in Mobile. And especially during the game was when he was playing at the second level and able to make plays in space. It was really interesting to me. Other guys from the linebackers room wise, to take a step back for a second, Will Anderson was another one that's being put into the linebacker drills.
Exactly.
Down there in Indianapolis, which I thought was interesting, considering he's going to be a guy on the edge. But I guess when you have guys that light playing on the edge, you want to make sure that they have outside linebacker ability as well. But in terms of guys that would play at the second level for us, I think Jeremy Banks is going to be interesting to watch. Jack Campbell, Servassier Dennis was down there in Mobile, looked good in one-on-ones. Ivan Pace is undersized, but plays bigger than he is. He's going to test really well. He's going to have some great numbers, and it'll just be a matter of, how much we value a guy like that is going to be at 5'10", 225, 30 pounds when it's all said and done, with, really good speed, really good toughness, really good physicality. Could be a little bit of a, move guy for us in certain ways. Henry 202 from Alabama was supposed to be in Mobile, never showed up. Was a guy I was really excited to watch. Dorian Williams from Tulane. Tyrus Sweet from Mississippi State is a guy that I think is extremely versatile. They kind of played him off the edge at Mississippi State a little bit, played him inside. They moved him around a lot at 6'1", 6'2", about 250 pounds. They have him listed at 260. He's not that big. I would be surprised if he actually shows up that big. But, what they tell me is that he's not that big, but, he's an extremely physical thumper type of dude that, historically the type of dudes that we love here in Chicago. On the offensive side of the ball, in terms of athletes, looking at these wide receivers, Danny touched on a lot of these guys like, Jordan Addison, who, again, won the Blindikoff last year, was really highly regarded coming out of Pittsburgh, transferring into USC. And you can, make a point that, everything was a little bit on the, chaotic side with a new coach, new system, everything, coming into play. Nothing really gelled towards the end there, in a lot of different ways. Quentin Johnson, another guy with great size, great speed that is really highly regarded. Danny talked about Antoine Green. Dante Demas is one that's really interesting to me, the kid from Maryland, who I thought 2 years ago might have been coming out, and to me would have been a day two guy, no doubt. He's had some injury issues since then. I'm interested to see how he looks running, how he looks in drills, what he does in Indianapolis, and see if he is at the same level as he was 2 years ago. They had 3 wide receivers down there in Maryland this year. Production split up, multiple different ways. Tua's little brother was inconsistent as hell. And it seemed like things are starting to fall apart at Maryland, so his production was down. He's a really interesting kid to me, one that I'm kind of hanging on to, that I'm holding out promise for. And maybe he does get back to that level that he was 2 years ago, and we're able to get him at a premium on day 3. That's something that'd be really interesting to see. Charlie Jones is a really electric kid at Purdue last year, highly productive, could protect the multiple positions in the wide receiver room. And then, the 2 guys that really stood out to me in Mobile, Jaden Reed and Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson, to me, is the one that really blew the doors off of his week down there in Mobile. Had a really nice year at Stanford, but, man, he did some excellent things down there in Mobile. Really looked like he took it seriously, like he wanted to win everything that he was involved in. I can't wait to see him continue this sort of mentality, this sort of attitude, this sort of, performance and production, throughout the entire week down there in Indianapolis. those are really sort of the things I'm looking at. DBs wise, I'm not putting a whole lot of process into that right now. That's a little bit further on down my priority list for me. Running backs wise, I have a short list of guys that I think would be interesting to take note of, like Chase Brown, who we saw in Mobile, Zach Charbonnet we talked about before. Evan Hull had a good time and had a good show in Mobile. Roschon Johnson, I can't remember what happened to him, why he had to take the rest of the week off, but if he's healed up,
his hand, I believe. I think it broke his hand. Yeah.
If he's healed up, it was good to see him actually do some stuff. Was hoping to get a good really good look at him in one-on-ones to see if he'd be a good fit. We seem to like a fullback in our offense. The Hunter Lepke kid from North Dakota State is sort of like a fullback, H-back, tight end, hybrid kid, 6'1", 240 plus pounds. He's going to run really well. He's going to jump really well. He has all kinds of physicality and nastiness about him. Could be a kid late to where if we have an embarrassment of riches, in the 6th and 7th round, I don't know if he'll be there that long, but if we have a chance to take him on day 3, that would be an interesting kid that I would love to see in the locker room, just from a culture standpoint. It's toughness, establishment standpoint. Would love to see that kid there in Chicago, but again, trying to keep that as concise as possible. Those are my thoughts on going down into Indianapolis for Combine Week.
Yeah, defensively for my guys, Aldo and Will Anderson was a guy that I've been on the record here and saying, like, I have questions in terms of him at the next level, projecting him. Curious where they have him listed as a linebacker, which is where I'm projecting him as well as a 3-4 outside linebacker. With him, like I said, I've been told he's going to be over 250 in terms of weight. So if he is 250, is it that just weight he put on for the combine? If so, how is he going to run? Size. I want to see arm length. I want to see all of everything about Will Anderson, because, like I said, I have a lot of questions about him. My top edge guy is Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. The only question I have about him is his medical, is his foot. Broken bone in his foot. Tall guys, big guys with bad feet kind of scare me. So that's the thing. I need to see how he comes through in terms of his medical. Does he come clear? Is he participating at all? I heard some reports that he might participate in some drills. So if he does participate at all, that's great news for Tyree Wilson. 2 edge guys. Niel, you touched on one of them. Guy that I'm totally in love with, and although you can attest to this, it's Will McDonald from Iowa State. I know he's people consider him a hybrid guy. I think he's a guy that could give you some of that edge speed, if you pass up on a guy like a Will Anderson, or a Tyree Wilson, if you don't get him in that first, if you trade down. Will McDonald is a guy that can bring that speed, bring that bendability, his ability to turn the corner is almost second to none in this draft class. The other guy, the Azuma kid from Kansas State. Another guy, undersized, edge rusher, defensive line. Both these guys, McDonough and Azuma, were listed as defensive linemen. So that tells you guys where the NFL scouts, the NFL sees these guys at the next level. So that's a little bit of a precursor there. So, Anderson listed as a linebacker, Uzuma and McDonald listed as defensive linemen. So that's kind of a little bit of a little foretell here in terms of how the NFL sees these guys at the next level. Real quick in terms of defensive back. I know Niel said you haven't touched on this, but I think the Bears are going to be in the market, whether it's a veteran free agent or in this draft class, for a nickel corner. And I don't think they're going to go get an outside corner, because you've already used your draft picks on that with the Gordon last year, and then a couple years before with Jalen Johnson. I think a kid like Chatavius Martin from Illinois. I know Witherspoon gets the big headlines, but Chatavius Martin was their nickel corner, and he's a damn pretty good cover corner in that slot position. So Chatavius Martin from Illinois is a guy to keep an eye on, guys, as a potential day 3, possibly nickel corner for you. And then a guy that both Niel and I loved, I think everyone loved down in Mobile, Darius Rush from South Carolina. 6'1", 196. Like I told you guys last week when we were reviewing the Senior Bowl stuff, he was running the routes for the receivers and those one-on-ones in those practices. So really just really kind of stood out there. He's a guy that showed the ability, the lateral quickness and agility to possibly, kick inside to play some nickel corner. Now he's a guy that you probably have to kind of maybe get second or third round is my guess. Just based off of what he did at the Senior Bowl, and then we'll see what he does at the Combine. But if he does, we talked about earlier, these guys taking that Senior Bowl week and kind of just riding the momentum into the Combine, and now continuing that next level and kind of raising their stock. Darius Rush, the corner from South Carolina, is a guy to keep an eye on. If he runs a clean or a nice quick 40, and he does looks clean in those position drills, he's a guy I can easily see go in that second round now because of what he's done in terms of his tape and what he did at the Senior Bowl. So those are a lot of intrigue, a lot of guys I'm paying attention to. Obviously, a lot of the scuttlebutt now comes out here with the combine. A lot of the agents are there. A lot of team executives are there. So we'll start hearing some things probably trickling out of there as well. But just strictly on the field, these are the players that I'm specifically keeping an eye on.
Yeah, you got any defensive players you want to share with us?
I went through most of the list. I think there's a couple guys I missed on the in terms of edge guys. Danny touched on Felix and Aduke Uzoma from Kansas State. Habakkuk Baldonado from Pittsburgh was really interesting to me. But Tyree Wills from Texas Tech, I forgot to throw out there. But for the most part, I've gone through my list. I think again, I try to keep it as that was only about half the list that I wrote down here in terms of guys I'm trying to keep an eye on throughout the entire event. I think of the 100, 200, 300, however many guys there are down there, I have half of them written down on my sheet. So I'm not going to go through everything, but the defensive backs group is one that I haven't had too many opinions on as of yet. Like, Danny said, we both really like the Darius Rush kid out of South Carolina. Unbelievable week down there in Mobile. Just every day of practice brought it. And, really blew everybody away. Was a locker room favorite, was a fan favorite, was an executive favorite, was scout favorite. Everybody loved the kid. He's the one. Him and Michael Wilson, I think, are the two that are really riding a massive wave of momentum right now into this week here in Indianapolis, and we'll see what comes out of this week, if they're still riding that wave or not. I love what they did. And those are two guys I'm really keeping the closest eye on, I think, in terms of just seeing their guys out of the offensive, defensive sides of the ball that I liked on tape, didn't know I liked that much.
And a position group that to keep an eye on, not that it's going to affect the Bears, well, it'll affect them in a roundabout way, is the quarterback position. See what Bryce Young measures in it. If he's under 6 feet, which is probably going to come in around 5'10", 5'11", under 200 pounds, that's going to be something that teams have to consider. But I'm telling you guys, I told you guys earlier, Aldo, I told you, Anthony Richardson is a guy who's going to go in the top 10. And I'm telling you, this kid is not ready. He's you watch his tape, he is inconsistent to say the least. But that skill set, his arm is a huge arm, quick release, athletic as heck, 6'4", 230 plus pounds. He's a guy that's gonna, if he's out there and he wows him in terms of his physical traits, which he should, and he goes into the meeting rooms and now starts, impressing these coaches with some of the, his ability to kind of, digest their playbook and kind of go up on that chalkboard and write things out. A team's gonna mortgage their future on this kid. I'm telling you right now, his skill set, his toolbox could be the best in this entire group. It's just he needs time. He's not ready to start next year for you if you're a team. So a team like we mentioned earlier with Nick, a team like Detroit, a team like Seattle, a team that's got veteran quarterbacks that can start next year or next 2 years while this kid sits back and learns and becomes better. Keep an eye on that group in terms of Young, Richardson, and also CJ Stroud, how they perform throughout the week, because that's going to be real key, especially if the team falls in love with one of these guys and now is looking to get up possibly to the first overall pick. And now that's where the Bears can start making some headway here in terms of trading down and getting as much capital as they can get.
I got to tell you,
Richardson has all the.
Please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, Anthony Richardson has. Probably all the tools in the box. He has a ton of potential. I would be very hesitant to surround that kid with chaos, though. I think he's got to go to a buttoned-up organization that has a bunch of pieces around him that is able to develop that kid the right way. I would be very concerned about allowing that kid to experience a lot of success, be extremely unsuccessful early on in his career.
Right, you could ruin him
for his development.
Yeah, you put him in a situation like Houston or Indy, where they need him to come in and start right away. He's gonna fail most likely. We put him out with like Detroit or with a Seattle, with a Pete Carroll, who's been there for years, who knows how to groom young quarterbacks. He's got a veteran, Geno Smith. I think that would be the ideal situation for Anthony Richardson. Yeah. So that's the thing here is like, how well does he do? Because if Seattle's sitting there saying, we're going to lie in the weeds here, we don't expect to be at top 5, picking at top 5 in the next couple of years. We're going to line the weeds here, and we're going to pluck our quarterback of the future. And they fall in love with Anthony Richardson. They might say, all right, crap, we're going to have to move up to get this kid. And guess what? Seattle is loaded with draft capital from that Russell Wilson trade with Denver. So they're a team that to keep an eye on with possibly moving up into that first overall pick to snag a kid like Anthony Richardson and kind of secure their future at that position. So Seattle is a team to keep an eye on here with Anthony Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I'm most looking forward to at this combine is on Sunday, March 5th. That's the day the running backs are working out, because I truly believe that the number 1 running back for the Chicago Bears in 2023 is going to be a draft pick, not a major free agent signing. And so I'm going to be taking a look at this running back class to see if there's a guy
number 1, huh?
Yeah, I really do believe that. I think, there's some really good running backs in this class. And I bet you that even at the top of day 3, the Bears have the top pick of the 4th round. I bet you they might be looking at a running back in that slot to, at the very least, compete for the number 1 spot. We'll see how, of course, the draft, works out, because things happen and all of a sudden somebody you thought that was going to be available in round 4 or 5 is gone on round 2. So that's one of my major focuses when I'm watching the combine this week. Before we get out of here, I want to get to a few questions. Toa asked about Zay Flowers. Do you think he goes in the first? He seems to be a Tyreek Hill type that they always like to draft in KC. Guys, what do you think about Zay Flowers?
Zay Flowers measured in at 5'9" with arms under 30-inch at the East-West Shrine. Those are not measurables that NFL teams invest first-round picks on. I love the kid's tape. I love the kid's competitive nature. I've been raving about Zay Flowers in terms of the even before the season started. But he's a guy that, for me, he's just too small. He's limited in terms of what he could do. He's not an outside guy. The Tyreek Hill comparison is not fair, because Tyreek is built like a linebacker. I mean, he's fast. He's 4.2, 4.3 speed. Zay probably will run a high 4.4, maybe a little 4.5, depending on what he does there. But he's an undersized guy. And right now, even though I love the kid and love the tape, I'm thinking, if you're an established team like the Chiefs, for example, in Tal's question there, Chiefs could take a chance on him in second round, end of the second round, or if not, that he's probably going late second, early third is where I think Zay Flowers is going to end up going.
What do you think, Niel?
Yeah, agree. Tyreek has Olympic level speed and explosiveness. To compare him to Tyreek Hill is there's a big discrepancy there in terms of how soon Zay Flowers would cross the finish line after Tyreek Hill would. But yeah, I mean, extremely productive on tape, like Danny said. I just don't think he's going to be, a first-round guy. I think anybody that takes him in the first round is going to be stretching a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about why he said no to the Senior Bowl and yes to the East-West Shrine Bowl game and only worked out one day in Vegas. That raised an eyebrow to me, So there has to be some really thorough looks into what his motivation is. Does he really want to be the best wide receiver in football? Because those are the only ones you want to draft. Either want to be the best wide receiver or the best blocking wide receiver, or the best something wide receiver. And so if Zay Flowers really wants that, he should have been at the Senior Bowl performing with the top level college all-stars. Next question.
Guys are competitive.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Go and be competitive. That the guys that show up and either, I understand quarterbacks want to do their own thing with their own, script and everything else. And that's why they don't throw out the combine. That is what that is. But if you're a position guy, I want to see you be competitive, man. Show up to Senior Bowl, show up to East West, show up to the combine, do the stuff, show that you want to beat the guy next to you, beat the guy in front of you, beat the guy behind you. It does matter in terms of the character section on the draft report, on the evaluation report.
Yep. J2K has a question about linebackers and whether they're good fits and where they might go in the draft. Zovicia Dennis and Dorian Williams. I don't know if you guys have done your Servassier. I don't know if you guys have done your linebacker evaluations yet, but any thoughts on J2K's question?
I haven't got to my linebackers yet. I haven't done my thorough thing yet, but Dorian Williams is a guy that's 6'1", 220 pounds, 215 pounds. It fits the profile in terms of a guy that can make some, tackles. But, in terms of giving an in-depth report on them, I don't have a good feel yet for those guys. Cause like I said, I've been doing offensive line, defensive line, receivers, linebacker isn't at the top of my list yet. So I'll be hitting those guys and definitely will be giving you my thoughts on those guys. But I don't know if Niel, have you seen any of these two linebackers?
I watched Dorian Williams play the Cotton Bowl. Stood out, but I don't really have a good feel for him yet in terms of where he might go. Servassier Dennis, they get up there at Pittsburgh. There's one thing I know about Pittsburgh guys on defense is that they're tough effort character guys. And he's a guy that I should say not last week, 2 weeks ago in Mobile really stood out in terms of the one-on-ones, and he made some good plays in space and team drills and those different types of things. Again, haven't gotten as in-depth yet. I don't think either of those guys are going to be day one, day two guys. I think you're talking about middle round guys that would probably come off the board in day three if I could guess. Right now, not having done an in-depth evaluation on them.
J2K also wanted to know about Raheem Jarrett, highly rated going into his junior year, but didn't live up to it. I wonder why and if he is a sleeper. You guys know anything about Raheem Jarrett? I haven't heard the name much.
I haven't. I know he is. I haven't done his tape just yet, but I know he's the receiver. Yep, but I haven't done tape on him yet.
J2K, I promise to get you a thorough report on Jarrett in the next couple of weeks. Indeed. Yep. And I got one more question here. As of today, PZ wants to know gut feelings about trading down scenario. I know you guys have been giving it some thought in between looking at tape and doing all the other various things you do for a living. What do you think, Mr. Niel Stopczynski, about trading down? What are your gut feelings?
Gut feeling, I feel like the Colts are going to be that partner. I feel like that they have a kind of a crazy guy owner that is willing to go ahead and do some crazy guy things. Mm-hmm. And in some way, shape, or form, he's going to talk Chris Ballard into making some sort of deal with the Chicago Bears, and what that might entail in terms of capital coming back is I think really up in the air. I think anybody in terms of what they're going to give up and as far as capital goes is really kind of up in the air right now. I'm not really sure that the leverage that the Bears have. Yeah, granted they have the number one pick, and teams are going to go ahead and try and come up with some way to leverage that pick on the Bears. Granted the Bears do have the leverage. I'm not sure that the leverage is strong enough. So I think that we're going to get something pretty good back. I'm not sure it's going to be in the level of something Christmas morning crazy that we thought we might have gotten before. Just a gut feeling, but I feel like if there's one I'd probably hedge a bet on right now, it would be the Colts. I know we talked about a few different scenarios today with Nick, where the Cardinals could be one, the Seahawks could be one, Panthers could be one, Lions could be one. Obviously, trading back to the Houston Texans at 2 is an interesting one because the Texans know they're going to get their guy either way. Why would they trade up? But I also feel like there's scenarios where you could trade back multiple times, and there's also scenarios where the Bears stay put at 1. And I think if you're Ryan Poles, you have to think about all these different scenarios, no matter how ridiculous you as a fan may think they are. As the guy in charge, you need to consider everything from multiple angles, and you need to consider all the leverage points you possibly have, and consider all the capital that you possibly have, and all the assets and resources that you have in your pocket, and make the best decision for the franchise. And there's probably 375 different things on the board right now that they could possibly do with 15 different teams. But if I have to go with my gut right now, put any money on it right now, it'd be the Colts. But that's just going strictly on gut, zero on knowledge or any sort of instinct whatsoever.
For me, I think in terms of first of all, some of the scenarios that you see out there on Twitter, on the internet are just ridiculous. I mean, no team's going to give you, 3 first-round picks to move up 3 spots. It's not going to happen, right? So if you're talking about, obviously the leader in the clubhouse is the Colts. I think that's a team that's the general manager's come out and said that he'll move heaven and earth to give a quarterback if he sees one that he wants. There's no guarantee that he sees one yet, that he just hired a coaching staff. So, the coaches got to dig into the tape. So I'm saying, like, this combine, these quarterback workouts and these interviews are going to be huge for Ryan Poles and the Bears. So keep an eye on what trickles out of the combine. So any sort of trade scenarios with the Colts or all these guys, especially the Colts who just hired a coaching staff. They haven't even got into their offices yet, moved in yet, and much less they're going to, mortgage their future for a quarterback. So that's something to just kind of like put on the back burner and see what happens, what develops. To two teams I mentioned today in terms of sleepers, guys that, teams that no one really is kind of talking about that could come up. Touchdown Seattle. Seattle might see an opportunity there that, hey, we got a chance. Like I said earlier, just a few minutes ago, we have a chance. We're not going to be in this. We don't expect to be in this position again to get our future quarterback. We have Geno Smith here as a veteran. We go get his kid, whichever one. I think it's going to be Anthony Richardson, but they might fall in love with C.J. Stroud. They might fall in love with Will Levis. Who the hell knows? But as long as they fall in love with one of these quarterbacks, I think Seattle's as a team to keep in mind. They have a lot of draft capital from the Russell Wilson trade. And then Carolina, I think, is just a sleeping giant. They have an owner that is also craving a big name quarterback. If they don't go out there and make a huge splash with like a Lamar Jackson trade or something like that, Carolina is a team like I mentioned earlier when we were talking to Nick. They're switching from a 4-3 to a 3-4. Evero, the defensive coordinator, mentioned that they're going to be flipping out. So, could a guy like a Derek Brown, their defensive tackle, be a guy that interests the Bears? Include him in a package to move up with number 9 and future picks. Remember, the farther down the Bears trade down, the more they can get in terms of players, trades, future draft picks, and all that stuff. So, that's a team to keep an eye on is Carolina number 9 as well, because new coaching staff, owner who's very, very, motivated to fix that quarterback position. So Seattle for me at number 5 and Carolina number 9 are two teams that no one's talking about right now to keep an eye on, because I think one of these teams is going to jump up and jump the Colts and jump the Texans to go and get that quarterback that they fall in love with. So it's going to be traded. The pick's going to be traded. I do not expect the Bears to make that pick at number 1. And I just a matter of who is going to fall in love with which quarterback and who's going to be willing to move heaven and earth to go get them.
Yeah, and I got to say that I think one of the keys to this scenario about trading down, it could be the Houston Texans. And I know Niel just talked about it and saying, they're probably going to get their guy. But the thing is that Ryan Poles has to create the illusion that some other team is going to trade up for number 1 for whoever the Houston Texans want at number 1 or whoever they want most in this draft. If you can then trade your first overall pick for the Texans' second overall pick and their 33rd pick at the top of the second round after the Steelers, then is it Steelers or Ravens? Steelers. Then all of a sudden you have now 2 and 32 and your other second rounder, and you're now still entertaining offers for quarterback hungry teams where their quarterback might still be available at that number 2 overall pick. You have got to create the illusion that whoever it is, the Texans' eye, even if it's a defensive player, you've got to create the illusion that the Bears or somebody else want that player and create the demand. And so even if you walk away with one additional pick, the 33rd pick of the second round, that still gives you so much more than what you have if you're just drafting the first overall pick. You've got to really create this scenario, this illusion. You got to talk to agents. You got to talk to reporters. You got to drop hints. You got to really create, as Greg Gabriel has famously said for the last several years, this is the lying season. And so you've got to go out there and start lying. But I'm not going to lie to you.
Why do you think? I mean, it drives me crazy. It drives me absolutely nuts. But why do you think Mike Tannenbaum's always on ESPN talking about the Bears drafting Bryce Young? Someone's whispering in his ears. Exactly. Someone's whispering in his ears that this is a possibility. So he's like, "Oh, I'm going to be the first out there, even if it's wrong. If it's right, I'm going to, And now all of a sudden, Mike Tannenbaum's getting all this pub and everything like that. But I don't think the Bears are going to draft Bryce Young. As a matter of fact, if Ryan Poles drafts Bryce Young, then I demand him to resign the next damn day, because that's taking the franchise back 5 years. So anyway, that's not that's neither here or there. But there's stuff leaking out that these guys are just grabbing onto and going onto their live sets and putting out there. So, and that's all by design, guys. It is like Greg says, like Aldo just said right now, it is lying season. You gotta drop that market, you know. And then everyone I've talked to says the Bears absolutely love Justin Fields, right? They just absolutely love Justin Fields. And in terms of
Foles himself came out and said that he's our guy next year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he hasn't come out and said that he's their guy. He just said that he has to be blown away. So he always put that out there in terms of, you know, what's, you know, he has, you know, he's open to, you know, to be listened to. But I just, you know, that's something that you have to do. You have to build that market up. And that the key is just takes one team to fall in love with one of these quarterbacks and say, we're moving it, we're doing whatever we can to get them. And then that's where it goes. And
I got to tell you, you mentioned the guy from ESPN, the former Jets GM.
GM, yeah.
This guy's not the brightest bulb in the rock. I can't. How he got a GM job is beyond me. Yeah. But twice.
He has two GM jobs.
Yeah, right. The other reporter, so to speak, that is almost on the Bears' payroll is Jason La Canfora. Jason La Canfora has a source over at Hallis Hall who is constantly feeding him misinformation. Constantly. And Jason, maybe he's getting paid to report this stuff, or maybe he's just stupid to continue to report on this fake news. Like other general managers are in discussions, whatever it was he reported this week, are in discussions with Justin Fields about the trade. That is all, in my opinion. I don't have an inside source. Greg Gabriel has never whispered anything to me. Greg has told me he knows who the person is, but Greg hasn't told me what I'm saying here, which is my theory, is that this is somebody who says during meetings with the general manager and decision maker says, don't worry, I'll let Jason know, and we'll plant that, and then all of a sudden it creates this interest. Now, I think also a lot of general managers in the league know that if Jason La Canfora is saying it, then it's probably not true. But those are the games that are going on right now, and it's fun to watch, and sometimes also very frustrating because there's a lot of suckers out there who are Bears fans and buy into this stuff. Great show, guys. A lot of fun. We could stay here easily another hour, but I have way too much respect for your time. I know you've got a lot of other things to do, but one way you can get more draft information is by going over to our patreon.com page /barroom draft, and you'll get exclusive, highly detailed scouting reports from Danny Shimon and Greg Gabriel. And then also remember, next Wednesday, March 1st, we have our private party. Niel and Danny are hosting a party for 7 Barflies. We've got a couple of spots still open. If you're interested in being a part of that private party to have your discussions with these guys, just shoot me an email or DM me on Twitter. Just get a hold of me. Aldo at bearsbarroom.com is my email, and then we'll hook you up and make this thing happen. So any final words, Danny and Niel? Niel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, just always, guys. We really appreciate you coming on, spending an hour and a half, however long it's been with us. Like the show, share the show. You know, love the participation in the chats. Really helps the algorithm. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter, and really all the social medias is the same handle for branding purposes, obviously. And it's easy to keep track of what my handles are. But at NIEL STOPCZYNSKI. Go ahead and follow me anywhere. Any questions, hit us up on Twitter through either DM or add us or whatever the case may be. And then just real quick, non-football related. If you go to my Twitter page, the first post I have pinned is my friend Nas looking for a kidney. Talked to her the other day. She hasn't had any luck finding anyone yet, but really appreciative that people share the post, that people look at the link inside, and just give us some thought at the very least. But main thing, just continue to share it. Internet, please help do your thing. Amazing person, great family. Just looking for a little bit of magic. So continue to share that out. Continue to let people know that one good person in the world needs a little bit of help.
Indeed. Yeah. Make sure you follow Niel on Twitter, and spell that one more time for us for the audio people.
Yeah, for the audio people, at NIEL STOPCZYNSKI.
Thank you, Niel.
It's funny that Niel has to read his last name on the screen in order to spell it out for us.
I noticed that.
Hey, that's what making fun of me about the Skowronski pronunciation, right? So I'm
good one. Danny, your final
He's
thoughts.
Speechless. Neil is speechless.
One for Danny.
Just to follow up, guys, this has been fun. It's great, and it's only getting started. Like I said earlier, the grind is in here. This is our time of year that we live for. Neil and I just love getting into the tape and answering you guys' questions. And some of the names that came up today, we just haven't hit that position group yet, but we'll definitely get that involved and come on in and join our Patreon, get our video scouting reports, join our party next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be able to kind of go back and forth, throw out scenarios in terms of mock drafts, trade downs, teams, players, so on and so forth. It's going to be a lot of fun. So looking forward to interacting with our listeners. And again, we're just going to be hitting that film again this week and just trying to get some more information on some of these draft prospects. But the combine is coming, and it's gonna be fun. I know a lot of people think it's the underwear Olympics and all that stuff, but there are some things that out of the combine that does come out that kind of, what it does for me at least, it kind of just checks another mark off the list, because does this player, does he run what I think he ran on tape? Does he run faster now that he's at the combine in his underwear, not in pads? That could be something you have to kind of look at as well. Is he, because these guys trained specifically to be able to run fast, but if you go back and watch their tape, it doesn't correlate to football speed. So things like that, in terms of defensive backs, their agility, their footwork, hips, there's a lot of things that you can find in some of these workouts that are very productive in terms of identifying a prospect and how he projects at the next level, specifically in the Bears scheme. So keep an eye on the combine. It is fun. It is entertainment. I definitely like to have you guys watch it and get your feedback in terms of who you guys thought did well or didn't do well. So
indeed, one of these days, some NFL marketing genius is going to make these interviews at the combine available to us hardcore fans, because really that is probably the number one reason, the number one value for NFL general managers is that 15-20 minute meeting they get with players, how they answer questions, what they do at the board when they're asked to talk about certain plays and so forth. And wouldn't we all love to just be a part of that? And so hopefully one day, at least segments of it, not the entire 15-20 minute, but I would love to see the highlights of a discussion between Ryan Poles and Jalen Carter, for instance. So
have you seen the one with DK Metcalf and Pete Carroll? So no. DK comes into the room and for his interview, and he's shirtless. And he walks in, and obviously DK Metcalf is all chiseled, and Pete Carroll takes off his shirt, and he goes bare skin, and he's in there with his his dad bod, if you will, and 60-year-old Pete Carroll.
I love it.
So those are some of the things that they we don't see unless the team shares it, so on and so forth. So
exactly. Great stuff. All right, everybody. What do we got going on? Today is Thursday. We've got Crosstown Crosstalk tomorrow. Today's Wednesday, tomorrow's Thursday. Crosstown Crosstalk at 2 p.m. Mac and Reed at 6 p.m. And we've got a lot more programming over the next few days, and most of it is all Bears related. I want to thank everybody in the chat room. Like Neil said, you guys really are an important part of this show. You keep the rhythm going, all your great questions, and I can't help but look at all the shit Don Burke gets from our Bears fans. Great job, guys. And so remember, we are back. On what date are we back, guys? For a live show?
We got the party going on next Wednesday.
Right.
The 8th.
Party
next the 8th.
Right. So on March 8th, another free draft on tap show, but we still have a couple slots open on the private party. So hit me up on email or on my Twitter DM. For Danny Shimon, Niel Stopczynski, and our special guest, Nick Baumgardner over at The Athletic. Thank you all very much. We'll see you next time.